Welcome to Financial Footsteps, candid conversations with financial leaders, the podcast that takes you deep into the minds of the masters behind the numbers. Join host Chad Dean as he connects with financial leaders as they share their journeys so that we can gain valuable insight from their failures and triumphs. Get ready for candid conversations, behind-the-scenes anecdotes, and practical wisdom that will transform the way you think about your career in finance. Put down the balance sheet and listen in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Financial Footsteps, where we explore the background and careers of financial leaders for the benefit of those who want to follow in their footsteps. My name is Chad Dean, your host. I've been a recruiter for 27 years, and I'm the owner and CEO of Integrated Management Resources, a Phoenix-based executive recruiting firm established 33 years ago. Integrated Management is the sponsor of this podcast today. Anybody who is a frequent flyer can see that our background is different than it normally is. We are in here very early in the morning, so we're all jazzed up on caffeine and coffee and super excited. And I am super excited to introduce you to our guest today, Paul Bigby, who is the Chief Accounting Officer of Cavco Industries here in Phoenix. Paul has had a long career in accounting and is full of wisdom that I know will be incredibly beneficial to our listeners. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Chad. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So let's always start with the personal side and talk about, just give me a little bit about where you grew up, your family, your hobbies, stuff like that.
Great. So I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I went to high school, and then I moved to Tucson, went to school at the University of Arizona. Bear down, exactly. And then after that, I moved up to Phoenix, and I've been here ever since I guess 1991.
Awesome.
So almost long enough to be considered a native, right?
And you have a family?
Yes, I do. So I've got a wife and 3 children. I've got a 26-year-old boy, and then my daughters are 22 and 24.
Awesome. Fantastic. And any hobbies? What do you like to do when you're, I know you work a lot, but when you're not working, what do you like to do?
I like to go hiking and skiing. And I think with the all the rain we're getting here, there's getting some good snow. We're going to go skiing this weekend. So that's probably my favorite hobby.
Going to Flagstaff?
Actually Sunrise.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit longer drive, so it's not as busy out there.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I've done a lot of skiing at Sunrise.
Oh, okay.
I've been there one time when there was so much snow, you couldn't ski because you would sink.
Oh, is that right?
I had to stick my head out of the side of the window when we were driving up because my windshield just froze over.
Oh, wow.
It was dumping snow like you wouldn't think. We're in Arizona, right? So anybody that's watching this is like, really, in Arizona? But Arizona is an extremely diverse state in that we have 8,500. Well, Mount Humphreys is over 12,000. And, and then we got the desert, which is just like last summer was incredibly hot.
Well, that's what people don't think about Santa Fe either, is it's 7,000 feet. It's almost a sister city to Flag.
Yeah.
And then the ski area there is at 10,000 as a base, and the big mountains there are 12,500, something like that. So
Taos.
Taos is good. That's about 90 miles from Santa Fe.
Oh, is it that far? I didn't know that. One of the only places left that you cannot snowboard, right?
Yeah.
Old school. Sticking to it.
I'm good with that too.
Love it. So take us back to the genesis of your decision to make a career in accounting and finance, or just what you were in school. Did you know before you went to U of A what you wanted to do? Tell us about that.
No idea. So I started out at U of A, and I'd always been pretty good at science and math. And so I went into the engineering program for mechanical and aerospace engineering. And that lasted about 2 years. I got through 15 units of calculus and all kinds of different things, and decided this really wasn't for me. I was still doing okay in school, and thought I'd go to the business program and just check out a variety of classes. I had a finance class, an MIS class, an accounting class. And the accounting just kind of came easy to me. It made sense. So that was kind of made that switch from engineering over. Had to catch up on a lot of credits. it's a lot different. Engineering, you kind of sit in the class and everybody's sitting there with their pencil ready to go when the when the time comes. And I go to this big accounting class. There's about 500 people in a big studio there, and it takes a teacher about 5 minutes to get everybody to calm down and put their daily Wildcat paper down and, and get to work. So I was like, this is a little lower key. I think I can take this.
I was in that class because I too went to U of A, and I started out electrical engineering. And going into electrical engineering, not good at math is not a plan of success. And so I found out very quickly I was not good at math, and I dropped out.
That's tough. That's tough.
Of that program. And then I remember taking Accounting 101 and how big that class was.
Yes.
It's funny, and I really enjoyed it. I liked accounting. It's not my gig, but I really enjoyed that class. It came also easy to me, and a lot of people say it's super hard. For me, I got to eat one of the easiest days I ever had because I just understood the reporting and understood balance sheets and income statements, and that's really all Accounting 101 is, right? So actually, I want to ask you about that. What is the difference between engineering students and accounting students? Do you remember back then? Is there a difference?
Yeah, I think it was night and day, right?
What is the difference?
So, I think the engineering students were a little more, I would say, focused and a little more introverted. Whereas when you get in that business classes, it's more of a extroverted group and people and that sort of thing. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So your degree on your LinkedIn says accounting/finance. What was the degree technically?
So it was both. So after engineering, I had to go basically 3 years. So it extended my schooling a year. And so it was only like 9 extra credits to get a finance degree. So that was kind of the extra semester. I could have done it in 4.5. But I figured, the advantage of having both would be great, and so that was the plan after the engineering kind of went by the side, and it actually saved me one time. So when I was taking the CPA exam, you go through this is old school, so some people won't remember it, but it used to be 4 parts, and on the practice part you have essays, and here I am going through the multiple choice, not feeling great about it. And I get to the problems, and the first one is a 10-point problem out of 100 on time value of money. So with my finance degree, it took me about 2 minutes to do it, and I was able to somehow fumble through the rest and get a 75, which is what you need to pass.
Fantastic. So there you go. That extra semester helped you out, right? Fantastic. So tell me, did you do any internships when you were in school, or what? Anything while you were in school, or did you just go through your classes and then
go
straight into work?
Didn't do any internships. I had a job. I worked at a golf course. So
which one?
Silver Bell.
Yeah.
So I worked there for 4 years, and so it kind of took up all my time, but it was great because I could do homework a lot, and while I was working, and it was free golf and everything else was good. So
fantastic. That's lucky. I was playing over at the at Randolph, the public course.
That was great.
It's cheaper. So you graduate. Did you have? So your first job was with PwC, right?
Correct. Yep.
And when did you find out you were going to get that job? Was it your junior year or your senior year?
So senior year, it was like September. And I rode my bike over to Old Main and, had my interview there. I think I've interviewed with it was Big Six back then. And I interviewed with all of them. And this was, I think PwC was the second one. And, it was great. I had my pick of 3 or 4, and, PwC seemed to be the best fit. And so that's the one I selected.
And you were there quite a long time.
14.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Long time.
And what were the changes that you saw over those 14 years?
It's just amazing. So it started out, kind of basic accounting, what you do, and then SOX took over, right? And when SOX took over in 2002, it changed the whole landscape of what we did, and the basically putting the onus on management and also the audit committee and the board. and opening, different avenues for them to be more accountable for the numbers, and having to really take responsibility, and also consequences if there are bad things that are happening that they should know about, but maybe they don't.
What did you guys feel at PwC from the fallout of Arthur Anderson?
So that was, that was a really tough one. And we gained in Phoenix because they lost all their clients, and we got about 3 or 4 of their really big clients. So for us, it was, we feel bad for the industry and all the people that you knew, that you went to school with, that, about that time, all that fallout, I was about a 10-year person. So, 15, 12, somewhere in there. And the people that I'd gone to school with that went to Anderson were up for partner. I knew one person that had just paid his buy-in, and then it goes to nothing, and they get nothing. So, except their big loan that they took out to buy their way in, right? So, we felt bad for, from that perspective that, now I think it's, they joke it's the Final Four, right? There can't be any more mergers because you get antitrust issues. And so, it was certainly an interesting time.
Where did PwC rank in those 6 at that time?
It depends how you look at it. I think we were 5 as far as revenues and number of clients. So I was actually the Coopers and Lybrand side prior to the merger. And so there was a Price Waterhouse side. I think they were 6 and we were 5. So you put the two together and we're pretty big. They had more of your blue chip, IBM, Intel, the really large companies. We had some of those. AT&T was one of our big ones. Fidelity was our big one. We owned Boston, where all the Fidelity offices are. And from that perspective, it was, you kind of had the big 6, and then you have everything else, and everything else, even below the big 6 was so far down the road. It was really, a different landscape.
Gotcha. When you, this is a strange question, but during the blow up of Enron and everything, and the spotlight that was put on public accounting, did people give you was it different at cocktail parties when you said, "Hey, I'm in public accounting," and everybody said, "Oh, really?" Like, what was that like?
No, if you're not in the business, arena, you don't really get it. So not that many people understood. I guess I would say some people understand public accounting and what that means and what you do, and that you're involved in that whole thing. But if you're not, you don't really. So I would say it wasn't, you didn't get too many of those head shaking or what are you doing or that kind of thing. So
okay, it came to my mind. I was wondering if anybody thought, if anybody said anything to you. So let's go back to your first year, way back to your first year. So you joined, it was Coopers and Lybrand, not PwC.
Correct.
Okay. So when you first joined, tell me about that first year, and do you feel that your education prepared you for that experience?
So I would say yes and no. So the first year was really interesting. It started out with a 2-week boot camp, if you will, in Los Angeles, and they had most of their clients from Orange County and LA and Phoenix and Denver. And so there was, I don't know, maybe 250 of us. And so you kind of go through 2 weeks of pretty hard, pretty much 8 to 6, that kind of thing. Not awful hours, but as that was to come. And so, it was a really, I would say school prepared me for the background that you need to do it. But most everything I learned was on the job, right? How you do things. You understand the basics. You need to know debits and credits and what you're kind of doing. And, a lot of the more technical aspects, but as far as what you're doing, how you audit, how you document work papers, how you deal with the clients, how you do interviews, all that kind of thing. It was really on the job training, which was great.
Gotcha. And they move you into management fairly quickly, right?
That's the thing about public accounting, that you pay your dues, you work a lot of hours, you get paid okay, you have good benefits. I would never say a bad thing in the world about public accounting and Coopers and Lybrand, which then became PwC, just because exactly what you said. You get that opportunity to be a manager at a very young age. So 2 years out of school was basically the track. You become senior associate, which means you are the person at the client's on site, with being the number one contact to the client, dealing with CEO, generally CFOs and controllers. And you have 3 or 4 or 5, 6, depending on how big the job is, people reporting up to you. So at 2 years, you're really kind of learning to how to be a manager, and you got a lot of bright people working for you, and you're dealing with the clients. So you get both of those managerial type roles, as well as just the ability to deal with all the high level people at the organization.
My impression of management in the public accounting arena is a lot like I think of the military, where you just automatically are obligated to do whatever the person above you says and work as many hours as you need to, and I think it's more of this is my impression. I want you to tell me if I'm wrong. It's more lockstep, like you move from private to this and that, and you move up. Versus the industry itself, where, and maybe it's more so now, but management now, there's a lot of emotional intelligence involved, and it's just a whole different animal. Is that, back in your day when you were with PwC, is that an accurate depiction of the way it was?
Absolutely, right. So you start as an associate. In 2 years, you're expected to be a senior. 5 years, you're supposed to be a manager. 8 years, you're senior manager, and then partners somewhere between 6 and 8 years after that. So yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Because in the regular world, industry world, it's not necessarily your growth. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get promoted at PwC if you're not doing a good job, but it just seems like it's not as lockstep in industry, right, as it was there.
Yeah, no, certainly not. I mean, when I got to industry, was so different than knowing what your next role is, and I still deal with that today. So I have people that I hire that are out of Big Four, and they are asking, what's my track, when's my next promotion, and you got to really explain to them there's several different avenues. It's not like public accounting where everybody's kind of doing the same. You're doing different things, but it's the same program, and it's the same really kind of progression. Whereas in accounting at our company, or any of the companies I've been to, really, it's completely different from from a progression standpoint. But there's still certainly tracks you can go down.
How was your first experience as a manager? Were you good at it?
No, it probably wasn't. Right. So you learn, and I think one of the things that was really a good learning experience is you do learn to deal with it, but you have to have difficult conversations. You have them with the client, you have them with your staff, you have them with your bosses, right? And so, back then it was great to just kind of take it all in and say, okay, well, I know this is new to me. What can I do to listen and figure out what these smart people are telling me to really take and pass on to others? So that was really how I saw that. I was gonna say, when I moved from public accounting to industry, it was just everything that I learned at Coopers and Lybrand, PwC, really was really. Then when you say your question about schooling and how much did you learn for your first job? Well, when I learned, and left at 14 years, went into a financial reporting role at Starwood, large public company at the time. And, it was just everything I had learned was just everything I needed. There was no more on the job training. So.
Got you. So that 14 years was really important in your career.
Yeah, completely.
How many times did you think about leaving in that 14 years?
Gosh. Yeah. I would say, I was pretty well tuned in as you start getting older, right? So after you've been there, 5 years and you're a senior, you become a manager. You say, okay, I want to do this for a couple of years. And then if you leave as a couple year manager, you're going to get really good jobs, right? So then if you stay to be on the senior manager, you're like, well, maybe I ought to do this a couple of years, right? And then so it continued to really kind of build down that different levels. And so, I felt like, I'd been there, I think at about 10 years, kind of look around a little bit, 12 years, maybe look around a bit. And then 14 was really headed down the partner track, and had a great opportunity that came to me from the director of accounting of personnel that we had at Cooper's and Library. I went to work for Starwood, and called me up one day. I usually don't take those calls, but since I knew the guy, we chatted, and it was just a really great opportunity to move on.
So if you had only an accounting degree and didn't do that extra finance work, do you think you would have gotten an FP&A role at Starwood?
I could have. I think, yeah, I would say accounting is a little bit more specialized. So the way I look at it is, you can have a controller or a chief accounting officer that can do FP&A. It's hard to have an FP&A person that can do accounting, right? Because FP&A is analysis, Excel, looking at different values, and it's a really great job, and it's a great skill, and it's really needed. Whereas accounting is more of a specialized field. You wouldn't necessarily go from the FP&A skill set without having the accounting background.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the way I look at it, the controller is really the messenger of the business, and they're really telling the story. And, that's important skills. But, FP&A, on the other hand, is great too. I always say FP&A is the best friend of the CFO, because the CFO wants to know data that controller is not going to have at his fingertips. FP&A is really good at that. So I remember when I was at Starwood, we had 5 international divisions. One was Asia Pacific, and he would say, okay, or I'll use, China was part of that division. And he would say, okay, I need to know the RevPAR of, all of our hotels in the tertiary cities, and then compare that to the large cities. So they get into a lot of detail that the CFO was that's what he wanted to know. And, I've seen that time and time again. The CFOs aren't as concerned with the financial accounting guys, but their FP&A, that's their thing.
Right. So do you feel that makes certain, maybe a chief accounting officer, not feel as good if they're not as close to the CFO, or is there any friction there?
No, not at all. They kind of do their thing and we do ours.
Okay.
I never felt that way. And, what was unique at Starwood is our corporate office was in Stamford, Connecticut, and we had the worldwide accounting function here in Scottsdale. So we had about 270 really, really bright people with, 40 CPAs on the staff. And it was, GL, consolidation, financial reporting, audit, and tax was all housed here, with our CFO in, first it was White Plains, New York, and then it was Connecticut. And he had his FP&A team there with him in Stamford, because that's where he wanted them. He wanted to be able to walk down the hall and say, this is what I need, and I kind of need it now. So,
yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So I already let you know I was going to ask you this question, but tell me about what happens to a company if they lose, let's say it's just small company. What happens to a company if they lose their FP&A head or team versus if they lose their controller? What's the difference?
So difference is, the controller, as I mentioned, is really the messenger of the business, and it keeps track of all your resources. Is there safeguarding over, even think of it simply, is there safeguarding over cash? Is it payroll getting paid to the correct people in the correct amounts? And are payables going to the vendors in the correct amount? And is cash being received? So these are all things that really have to happen and be, just in order to make sure you safeguard your assets and have proper, totals of different amounts. Whereas FP&A would be, okay, well, your cash came in, it was $1 million, and 675,000 was from, China, and this much was from, say, New Zealand, Australia. So all the different pieces. So they would probably break it down more, I would say, and look at more of the details. But without the accountants, you're not going to be able to really have a place to start.
Well, so if the CFO walks out and the controller is gone and payroll didn't get paid, what's the FP&A guy going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Is he going to be able to go in and do the payroll? Probably not, right?
Probably not.
But if the controller's there, he can maybe throw together a quick spreadsheet and do some calculations, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. And you have to pay your employees and you got to pay your vendors, and that's going to be from accounting.
Yeah.
And, you're going to collect the cash, and that's accounting.
and
So,
what about all the liabilities that you have out there as far as bank relationships and stuff like that? They want reporting and all that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, is there a particular experience that you had? I mean, we really delved into PwC and how that prepared you for industry, and you walked into Starwood and you felt very competent. Are there any other specific roles that you feel catapulted you into the chief accounting officer at such a large organization? Are there any roles that really stick out to you?
I would say it was really the time I spent at Starwood. So I was at Starwood for about 12 years. My first 7 or 8 years was in financial reporting. So all the 10Qs, 10Ks, 8Ks, debt deals, S3s. I'll stop giving acronyms here, but they're all SEC reporting items that we have to do for being a public company. You've got certain periodic reports you've got to do, and then when you do debt deals and things like that, you have extra filings to do. So I think the skill set I learned is when I went from public to Starwood, you really don't, you've done accounting for 14 years, but you haven't had the nuts and bolts of the GL and things like that. So you kind of learn that. But the things you're doing as far as evaluating different accounting issues, doing your research, documenting it, and accounting memo, all that stuff was the same. So really, the differences were, I felt like, being in that role for 7 years, you see a lot of things, and you see different industries, and you see all parts of the business, right? So you're getting the money from overseas. You got your forward contracts to hedge your euro exposure and different things like that. And so, from just that aspect, having such a large public company with so many different pieces was really a great learning ground. Something was different every day. Starwood wasn't a hotel company. They were a diversified company called ITT that they were acquired by Starwood. It was kind of David and Goliath, right? It was ITT was huge. It was a $2 billion acquisition, and they turned that into Starwood, was a 25 hotel company. So overnight it had 600 hotels and all the other things that ITT had. They had gaming operations. They had, things that we had to sell off. And then they also had a lot of joint ventures, land deals. And so not things that you would normally see at a hotel company, strictly like a Hyatt or a Marriott. And they, that really changed the complexities of what we did and the accounting issues that we really encountered.
Gotcha. So then you went into audit. Were you tapped for that? Were you driven to go into audit? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So you kind of do the financial reporting for a number of years, and I kind of got us through 08 and 09, which is really interesting times. And, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what impairments we had. And, we had impairments in our timeshare because we had timeshares that we sold in Florida. And we had all these sales centers that weren't selling homes anymore. And so we said, is it value recoverable? And no, it wasn't. We had goodwill on the books for when we bought the timeshare company. And so, a lot of that, exposure was things that we did, and we had to report on it. And, after, I think it was about 2014, I'd done financial reporting for my entire career at Starwood. And I talked with a buddy of mine who's chief accounting officer, and he, convinced me that I should go into the audit role just to see a little bit closer of how the hotel operates and things like that. So I moved over into internal audit at Starwood that was we had 4 directors, and my area was corporate and timeshare.
Gotcha. And then you went to senior director, corporate finance and accounting. So what's the difference of that role?
So after I'd been in audit for about a year, I was actually promoted to the global internal audit leader. And so I had about 28 people on my team, some in Singapore, some in Brussels, and then the rest in the US. And after that, we were purchased by Marriott. So that was a big change in what would happen. And as people were kind of leaving, I was able to stay on for about a year and a half after the deal closed to do different things and help with the integration. With my internal audit background and financial reporting, it seemed to be the things that were transitioning over to the new company, and so I was able to assist in that. As a result of that, I had some other duties that came on as people were leaving. One was, excuse me, the controller of the sales and marketing fund. It's about $1 billion fund, and the way that works is all the hotels put in a certain amount of money into this big pool, and people are spending all this advertising. So it's about $1 billion. Interesting role. So it was really kind of an ancillary deal. Wasn't part of really what I did core, but I did do that for about a year and a half.
Why do you had such good tenure, right, at these two different firms? What is it about you that you got tapped continuously for more and more responsibilities? What do you attribute that to?
I think it's hard work. A lot of it doesn't come easy. Maybe for people smarter than I do, it does. But it always seemed to me if you worked hard and you understood what you were doing, you put your time in, things become easier. And the other thing was just the way it was taking opportunities just to learn a new skill set. Like when I went to internal audit, I was kind of kicking and screaming a little bit, right? But then I just said, I'm going to use this to, be an opportunity just to get another feather in my cap, learn how to do something new. So, and that was a great learning tool, because when I went over there, then you're doing, you're not doing debits and credits. You're doing more discussions with senior management on, what are the things that keep them up at night? What is kind of an enterprise risk management, right? ERM, where you're talking about, strategic really things the company's doing. And remember the first time we're going through these discussions, you sit down with the CFO and say, what keeps you up at night? What are the things you're worried about? I was about to jump out the window after about a 20-minute conversation. I'm like, wow, the sky's falling. But it was really eye-opening to see that this is what people at that level think of. And, it's not just, okay, here are all the things we're going to do. It's like, here's what can happen bad. So, we really went through the whole likelihood and magnitude, is it going to happen? And if it does, how bad is it going to be? And, that was one of the things that, I did initially. And it was really, I think it really broadened my scope from just really accounting and financial reporting to really how does a company operate? What are the things they think about at the senior levels? And, how do I fit into this piece?
Gotcha. And then you went to do more audit, right, at Caesars?
At Caesars. So, after the Starwood time, yeah, it's kind of unique. I love hospitality. It's kind of in my DNA. And, and when I was at PwC, I had gaming clients, and it was unique. There was a public gaming company based here. They used to be Ramada, and they they owned Marie calendars and Ramada. They sold off the hotels and the pie shops, and they kept the gaming entity intact. And that was one of our clients. So I had clients in Atlantic City and Las Vegas and Laughlin. So I really had that accounting background. That was kind of my expertise was gaming companies. So when I, was looking for something after Starwood, the opportunities with Starwood were all in Bethesda for the most part. And that really wasn't in the cards for us. So, gaming opportunity came up, and it was something that I'd really enjoyed at PwC. It was by far my favorite client, and was on that client for 12 years. And it was a natural progression. Yeah, this is something I already know, and so I think that gave me a leg up on getting that job as well, was the experience that I'd had. And so it was that was a good fit. That's how I got there.
What was it like going, like 14 years, and then interviewing again?
Yeah.
What did you know the people you were interviewing with, or did you have to go in and actually execute real well? Like what was that like?
When I went to
Caesars,
yeah, it was starting over again, right? It was, it wasn't as bad as I thought, because I only interviewed for about 2 or 3 jobs, and this was the third one. It was the best fit. So it wasn't like a shotgun approach. I was really selective. I had time. I could have stayed at Marriott, longer if I needed to. After about a year and a half, there wasn't, a whole lot left to do, but there was still a need for, doing certain things. But I was pretty selective, and I can only remember about 3 companies I interviewed with for, that next role at Caesars.
Gotcha. So what advice would you give to someone that's interviewing for their first leadership position? What would you tell them?
So I think for leadership, you want to talk about really 3 pillars. So you want to talk about your people. You want to talk, obviously that's going to be your number one key, but then you got to have your focus on just your basic background. And then, what you see really strategically as far as what you want to do with your team, your relationship with your peoples, and how will that translate into the business and what the company needs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really taking your people skills, demonstrating that you have that ability. You've done it before. You've had success at it. Give examples, probably of what you've done. And have you seen, the way I always measured how I was doing with teams was seeing my people and how well they were doing. And if they're being promoted and they're being highly thought of, then I like to think that I had something to do with that. Not all entirely 100%, but you certainly, to me, that was my measuring stick. So when you interview, if you're thinking about, how you want to demonstrate this, you want to, that's one area you may want to look at is, the people that you've managed, how are they doing? Were you able to kind of bring them along, push them in the right direction?
Mm-hmm. So maybe think of a question. What do you think leads to low attrition within an organization?
So it's unique that it's a great question because, and I'll jump ahead to Cavco. We've got, 31 manufacturing facilities and, probably 4,500 factory workers, and, it's hard work, it's labor. It's, except for probably 1 or 2 locations, there's no climate control. So, you're working pretty hard, long hours, and, not the best conditions. And so, there's attrition there, but we see it more at the 0 to 6 month person. Once, if somebody makes it 6 months, they're going to be there for 15 years, right? Is what we've seen. But a lot of people figure out, okay, this is a job. I've got my college degree or my GED, and that's what I need. And give you a hammer, and they figure out that's not what they want to do. So we see that attrition at the lower levels until people have been there a while and they decide. And we're doing things to fix that. We've got different, what we call the Master of the Craft program, where we are teaching people how to do a roofer, how to do be an electrician, how you be a plumber, and just things that, as homes go down our assembly line, people can do different things and, see a career rather than just, a laborer. So
Gotcha.
Doing things like that.
What about in accounting and finance? You stayed 14 years. What do you think kept you at these organizations that long?
I think PwC was great because you just keep learning. You basically get paid to learn your entire life because you're learning new things, new skill sets, new accounting pronouncements, things that are coming out and they happen all the time. It's just, you continue to learn, which was, I think, what kept me at PwC. And then when I went to Starwood, it was just a great environment. Like I said, we had really bright people. There was, all the different facets of accounting were there, all the different types. And, it's just a really young, bright, highly motivated people. And that really drew me to Starwood, not to mention the hotel benefits.
Right. Yeah. Benefits are good, right?
Yes.
So at Starwood, it was the people that you were working with that kept you motivated and interested in staying there.
Absolutely.
And that has to do with the culture too, right? It's also a cultural thing.
A culture, and culture was important there, right? And I think of culture in 3 ways. It's who we are, what we do, and how we do it, right? And, we were really, we were stewards for a public company. That's a big thing. You just, it's not your money. It's shareholders' money, right? So when we're, we have to be good stewards of the resources and things we're spending. We have to be good stewards to tell the story correctly. And so these are important things. And so what we try to do is really convey that to our associates, that this is bigger than just your accounts payable rec or your bank rec. Whatever you're doing is really part of the whole. And so, we really say that that's who we are. And then, what we do is we tell the story. And how do we do it? Well, with integrity and ethics really is really what we try to convey to our teams and get people to kind of buy into that, because that's, at the end of the day, that's really the job is really telling the story, telling it correctly, and making sure you have a lot of integrity in what you're doing.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And I love that you have 3 things lined up, and you've obviously, you live by that. So that's fantastic. What do you look for in someone that you're interviewing? Are there any specific questions you ask, and what do you look for when you're looking to hire somebody?
Now I'll get to give my thanks to public accounting. So, that's the best training ground in the world. First thing I look for is, did this person work at one of the big 4 accounting firms? And if they do, I'll look and I'll know how long they stayed. I'll know what level they did, and I'll understand from my experiences what they've done, what they know, and what they don't know. Just from that one thing on the resume that says PwC, KPMG, Deloitte, EY, whatever it is. And to me, that is, you can't get people trained better. So like I said, I'll give thanks to public accounting forever. Long hours, but you're going to get the best training in the world. And when I look for people, that's what I look for. And, it depends what role, but when you're, corporate controller, any of the levels really, that to me is, we've had great successes with that. So
do you look at somebody different if they left after 2 years versus after 4 years?
No, not really. If they stayed a year, then you kind of may ask some questions about it, but 2 years on, it's really things happen, and some people want to stay longer, or opportunities come up. Less than a year or less, you start to wonder. But other than that, it's just different timetables, fine for everybody. Right?
Is there a rule that a client can't hire away from their public accounting firm?
It's really depending on the level of person. So like if I wanted to go to a client, there had to be a lot of vetting, and you couldn't be redoing stuff that you couldn't be doing stuff you audited, or vice versa. If you went from the client to the accounting firm, you couldn't audit what you'd been doing before you left. And so there are limitations. You can do it, but there are limitations on what you can do for a period of time.
Because I'm sure they're getting job offers every other day.
All the time.
I know as recruiters, we're calling people in public accounting all the time.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure you see that too, right?
Oh yes. Everybody wants somebody from Big Four,
That's right.
and then, or we'll take somebody, that at one of the second tier firms.
Regional, yeah.
But everybody wants that, and there's just flat out not enough of them.
Right.
And, there was a big draw recently into private equity. Private equity over the last 3-4 years absorbed a tremendous amount of people that might otherwise have gone into public accounting. And so you look at the Big Four, they're doing a lot to keep their staff. They're giving a lot of bonuses, retention bonuses, trying to keep these people, because industry's always wanting to take them. And then the private equity world took a whole bunch of people. Now, obviously, that's reversed. Rates went up, and that really changed the private equity VC landscape. But if you could go back anywhere in your career or anything in the beginning, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I thought about this a little bit, and you had bumps in the road and different things. Probably the only thing I would do would be more things that I've learned later on in my career. Never be afraid to ask questions in the beginning, because you can't ask enough, and you can't ask enough in that first 6 months. Because if you're doing what you're doing, and you can kind of fumble your way through, an audit following the part of your work papers, but if you don't understand what you're doing, you start asking these questions in a year and a half, then that's a problem. So, I would encourage everybody to don't be afraid to do that. And, the other thing I learned was to look at different things, different angles. A lot of times, I would be laser focused on this is the way it is. And I had a hard time, receiving other people's views. And, to me later on in my career, sometime at PwC, I learned that you got a lot of smart people around you and they got different ideas. So instead of just being laser focused on what I thought, I think the other change I would have made sooner is just really collaborating more and listening more to what people said and their ideas, instead of just sitting there waiting for them to finish so you can talk more about how great your idea is.
That's key.
Yeah.
Listening. Yes. That's what's that thing? God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth.
That's right.
So I want to delve into this more. So you're a leader and you have a junior person walk into your office and they want to ask you a question, but they have apprehension to ask you that question because they don't want you to think that they don't want you to feel that they don't know what they're doing or that they haven't been trained properly. How do they get over that anxiety of asking a question?
I think the way it is how you approach it, right? So when they come in and they ask you a question, if you really try to put yourself back in their shoes when you were that new to something, right? Maybe they're doing a stock, compensation reconciliation, whatever they're doing, they haven't done it before. And so, I really try to just start from the basics and think, okay, well, let's set the table in a way that, we can make it really bite-sized and make sure they understand really what we're doing and then why we're doing it. So, I think it's just more, really starting at a novice level so they don't feel challenged. Make sure you can get on a level playing field with them and what they're understanding, and then then it'll give you a better idea of where they're getting hung up, and then you can kind of dig into that. So I think it's more that initial really, setting the table and figuring out where they're at.
So let's put you back in their shoes. Okay. And you have, this is purely hypothetical. I don't know if it happened or not. You have a PwC senior manager, you're 1 year in, and you have a question that you want to ask that person, but you're anxious to do it because you don't want them to feel that you don't want them to look at you like you don't know what you're talking about. And maybe that person has that aura about them, but maybe it's just imaginary in that junior person's mind. How do they overcome that anxiety? So think of you back as a year one person. Is there any advice you could give to somebody like that?
Yeah, like I said earlier, it's on the job training, and so it's expected, right? I mean, that's the culture. The culture is you're being taught from your manager or your senior, and then you kind of become your senior, and then you work for different managers, and you kind of pick up what they're doing. So I think there was never kind of the message I've been trying to give here is that you really can't ask enough good questions, or you can't really ask enough, and if you don't understand, well, that's kind of the culture there. So you're really, it's not, unexpected that you would be asking questions of somebody.
Good.
And so they're pretty receptive to it, and they kind of understand the pyramid and how it works with, at the beginning, and you get, coached up as you go, longer you stay.
Gotcha. So you already answered one of my other questions is what would you go back and tell your younger self? So you just nailed that. But, somebody that wants to achieve your title, Chief Accounting Officer, Cavco's publicly traded. That's a very important role. What would you tell somebody early in their career that wants to achieve the Chief Accounting Officer title of a publicly traded company?
So I would say, you need to have diversity in what you do. So you can't just be a financial reporting guy, right? You've got to understand how the other parts of the business work. So even to a certain extent, taxes is under my watch, and I'm not a tax expert. I can know just enough to do, dangerous things with tax, but I have really bright people that are my tax accountants, but it's just a matter of managing them. So you got to at least be able to speak that language. You got to understand IT. IT's building blocks for everything we do, and you can't operate without IT. And I think in today's world with, colleges, I think they do a really good job of training people up on what mainframes are. And, it's no longer the AS400, it's Oracle implementations and all these things that people are getting the advantage to. That wasn't that way when I started. IT didn't really become a feature, and I'm not that old, but until probably the 2000s is when it really became a focus where the audit team had to really understand that. So, I guess the point is, as chief accounting officer, you want to try to get as many things as you can. Treasury is another area you want to understand. You don't have to be an expert at any of these, but you have to know enough to speak the language, ask the right questions if you don't, and, rely on the people that you have that have those skill sets.
Do you think you could come up through tax and eventually become a chief accounting officer?
Sure. Certainly you could. The tax people are bright. It's not the usual route. I would say, 2 out of 10, maybe. You can't do it, but it's definitely not really the highway to get there.
Gotcha. But audit is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What you said about audit, as far as you're talking to the leaders of the company and what keeps them up at night, that's the way to learn the business.
Yeah, exactly.
From the top down.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Well, if you can believe it, our time has flown here.
Wow.
And we've covered a lot, and you've given us a lot of great insight into the accounting world. And I really appreciate that. And so if people have additional questions for you, how would you suggest that they go about reaching you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and Paul Bigby. You can find me there, and be glad to have any questions that you come across or things you want to talk about your career. Feel free to just drop me a line there.
Fantastic. I, as well as a recruiter, live on LinkedIn. It's one of the first apps I open in the morning. For better or worse, and you can find me on there. You can also Google Chad Dean Integrated Management, and I've finally come up number 1 on there. So thank you very much, Google. And so that's it. And I appreciate everybody listening to this episode of Financial Footsteps.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Financial Footsteps, candid conversations with financial leaders. We encourage you to apply the knowledge and wisdom shared in these conversations to your own career. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback is important to us as we continue to bring you more candid conversations and thought-provoking insights from successful financial leaders.